Mish!
Heya! Today I've got a little follow-up to my Trader Guard painting tutorial. I had mentioned that I was saving the Ogryn to do more extensive details, and I decided that doing a video on the process of painting his chaosified flesh would make the most sense. As far as his armor, fatigues, and metallics go, I really didn't change much of anything, so if you want to get a recap, check out the main video. I did end up doing a little bit more additional highlighting when it came to the armor, but I put this in a short if you want to see that. But before we get into the painting, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on to never miss another mishmashed painting video. Like always, here's a little list of all the paints I used for this video. Not very many, but it's a lot of blending. Also, I'm back on my regular upload schedule. Last week was just particularly cluttered with personal life stuff. To start things out, I'll be airbrushing Dark Plum from Pro Acryl over the entirety of the Ogryn. I'm focusing this from the top, and as you can see, I've stripped the mini since the last video as I had to redo them a few times. After the initial spray, I added some red gray to my mixture within the cup itself, and I'm angling this even farther from the top. Also, I should probably mention this isn't exactly ideal to do to an airbrush. Letting paint sit in the cup for too long allows it to dry and thus clogs the airbrush. But I figured I could get away a little longer considering these are Pro Acryl paints and they last forever. And I was right. I made sure to give it a thorough cleaning afterwards, I'm not that abusive. This already looks pretty good, and you could easily call it good here, but I can't help but fuss with it. I added some dark flesh to the mixture that was already in the cup once more, and I'm angling this from the very tippy top. I wasn't really sure if I really needed this or not, but I ultimately used it to my advantage when blending. Also, a huge shout out to Next Level Painting for teaching me one of the best airbrush tips ever. I always love using the gangster gumbo. After this portion of the flesh was done, I began spraying a 3-to-1 mix of dark plum and burnt red over the claw. I added just a little too much airbrush thinner, and it's very apparent when you see that my mixture is spiderwebbing. It's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world if you're just learning to airbrush, and I don't really use airbrushing for anything super fancy. Not excusing it, it's kind of a bad habit, but just something for you to know. I think it's important to point out flaws in my own painting for all the newer painters. As you can see, I went a little hard with this color. I really wanted a proper gradient from the arm to the claw, and to do this I mixed a little bit of dark plum and red gray once more, focusing more on the upper arm of the claw appendage. I was much happier with this. Plus I think this adds a progressive look of corruption. I also want to mention now that I ended up fussing with the claw a lot more towards the end of this video. You could leave this as is and it would look great, but I ended up doing a little bit more. I gave these colors a good amount of time to dry, and then I began shading over using a mixture of Leviathan Purple 2-to-3 with Contrast Medium. The way the medium dulled down the purple was ideal, and it flowed very nicely into the crevices of the muscles. I cannot begin to tell you how satisfying it was to shade this mini, especially after 2 failed attempts of painting him. But once I was happy with the initial coating, I then decided to mix some Flesh Terror's red into the mixture. This gave a much more warm and irritated color. This would be applied around the areas where the Chaos Star is seemingly grafted onto the Ogryn. I cannot imagine this really helps him as far as movement in battle, but goddamn, it's gotta be intimidating. We'll also focus this color near the crab claw hand. I'd also wick it slightly into the more prominent points of the back as well as the Ogryn's giant head. I do my best to make it settle nicely into the temples. Next, for the bone elements, I'm just using some dark ivory. I'd then mix this color slightly with red gray into the crab claw bone thingies. Whatever the dull, crushing bits are of a crab claw. These weird things, I don't know what they're called. I'm a little messy with this application, but that's because I intend to go into further detail on the claw later on. Like with every miniature I paint, I had a little hang up with this guy, and that was the claw. Hang up in the sense that I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. But over time, thinking it over while painting other elements of the miniature, I figured it out. And that's pretty much the extent of planning out my miniatures. It's really as much clairvoyance as I can give myself. It's probably why it takes me so long to paint miniatures. I always feel like I paint slower than the average painter, but I'm realizing it's because I can never pick anything. But hey, it's why I like these Kill Team boxes. I kinda use them to force me to pick a couple ideas that I like, and use the final two guys as kind of a way of doing extra. After doing so, I'd mix some red-gray with Vallejo's Glaze Medium, focusing the color on the high points of the flesh, and somewhat sketching in some highlights. These said sketch highlights being primarily on the face. I'd also mix just a touch of dark plum for this side of the face, as it has a much more purple hue as opposed to the more exposed right side. I'd also mix this color heavily with the glaze medium at the end, going over kinda lazily to blend the colors. For the bone areas, I'm using just a little bit of pallid bone, pretty self-explanatory, and I still love this paint. I also just want to ask, since I'm painting so many kill teams on the channel, I was wondering if you guys wanted to see any battle reports. Might be a little while away, but depending on the response I get, I'd probably be up for it. So far this guy's looking pretty damn good, but one part in particular really bothers me. This mini has a really ugly seam line between the parts on the deltoid and trapezius muscle. And what really sucks is I actually sealed this up using sprue goo, but after I stripped the mini and reprimed, I didn't realize the seal was stripped along with the paint. After bitching about it to a friend, they gave me a suggestion, and that was to make it into a fresh wound, which is exactly what I'm doing here. I begin by mixing dark flesh with magenta and glaze medium, creating a very gradual effect of irritated and inflamed flesh. As we build up this color, we'll add more magenta to the mix, and focus it more around the wound itself. I do feel like I was a little bit more diligent with this blend than I needed to be, considering I was going to be covering it up with blood. You could just do what I did, and I think it would turn out great, and I'm pretty happy with it overall. But I really do feel like I could have sped up the process a little. I don't blame you if you skip ahead. I kind of feathered this in over time, and once I was happy with it, I applied my personal mix of blood for the blood god, as well as a little bit of typhus corrosion to make the blood further from the wound look more aged. I'd use more pure blood mixture over the wound itself to give the effect of fresh blood to dried blood. Like I did with the more magenta-y flesh on the initial scarring, I'm kind of feathering the colors of the blood. I'm kind of fussy about how it applies, as I don't want it to be too much. I think too much blood always ruins a miniature. I think a lot of people end up using blood for the blood god as more of a main event when it really should just be a feature. And after feathering this paint, I'm really happy with how the skin looks underneath. I think this looks really realistic. Now, it was around this point that I decided I wanted to fuss with the crab claw. I do this by creating a blend of burnt red over the higher points of the claw and Vallejo model color black towards the bottom. I do this mix a couple of times, really wanting to establish a red hue towards the top. And this would kinda cause me to redo the bone elements on the claw, but whatever. I'd be slowly adding in the black towards the bottom, and I would really want to feather this in along with the red. As you can see, I'm kind of bringing it up close to the middle ground of the claw, and I'm just slowly patting it in with my brush. I'm kind of mixing in the red colors to really create this blend, and the red colors will be a lot more stark on the upper sides. Especially on this ridge of the crab claw, I'd end up applying a little bit of burnt red twice. I'm kind of mixing the black as it's still drying along with the red, and this creates a pretty nice gradient. I think this looks pretty good overall. I'd add a little bit of watered down black to the holes in the claw, and then I'd add another sketch method over the ridge of the claw using burnt red. I was really happy with the texture I gave the claw, as well as the nice contrast between the raised edges and the shadows. Here I'm just reapplying that pallid bone like I mentioned earlier. To finish the mini, I added a little bit of Magos purple into the eye sockets. This of course being mixed heavily with contrast medium. I then add a little bit of my red-gray glaze to any outstanding parts in the flesh that looked a little too dark. After that, I decided to call this guy finished, and I'm really quite happy with him. I think it was rather satisfying to fiddle with the Pro Acryl paints again, and I really think the time and effort going into this mini was well worth it. And I hope it was entertaining, and I really hope it was helpful to you. I enjoyed focusing more on a more niche element to this miniature as opposed to doing a full tutorial. It gave me a lot more time to work with things and go into more detail. And overall, I really enjoyed painting this kill team, and it kinda has me hungry for more. And there's no shortage of kill team boxes. Yeah, I'm probably gonna end up doing a kill team series, but anyway. I think I've flapped my beak for long enough, and I humbly ask you one more time if you liked the video or found it helpful, do any of these thingies, and share it with a friend. But most of all, don't forget to mishmash, kit bash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna, I promise. See ya!